Welcome to the 16th Annual Legislative Town Hall on Intellectual, Developmental, and Other Disabilities. I am Christina Botero, Guardianship Coordinator with the Arc Pikes Peak Region. I am so happy to be standing in this remarkable museum. For those of you who had the opportunity to take the tour, I hope you enjoyed your experience. The contributions of athletes of all abilities displayed throughout the museum is an excellent reminder of the importance of accessible and inclusive communities for all people, no matter their age or abilities. Thank you to the museum staff for all your support in making this evening possible. I am so very happy to welcome our virtual audience in attendance this evening. I frequently remind myself to look for the good in difficult situations. And I firmly believe that the last couple of years have taught us how to truly be inclusive by opening the door to virtual connections that were often overlooked before the entire world made it a necessity. We tend to refer to the in-person/virtual as a hybrid experience. I hope we move to it being the norm. I must give a shout out to Eddie Sound for providing the audio-visual support for our in-person and remote audiences. Thank you. I would also like to thank Brittany and Paul with Sign Language Network, for providing sign language interpretation this evening. For those participating through Zoom, you can turn on closed captioning and pin the window for the interpreters. If you require technical assistance with these features, please reach out via the chat function. We have a few housekeeping matters to go over. The restrooms are located outside of the auditorium down the long hall. You should have picked up an agenda and ground rules when you checked in for the town hall. We ask that you please review the ground rules and adhere to them. Due to our time constraints, we ask that you write down your questions on the index cards that you received when you came into the auditorium. If you need an additional card, just wave your hand and we will make sure one of our runners gets that to you. Once you fill out the card with your question or comment, we have volunteers who will pick those up and bring those to Lois as assistant. You will have the opportunity to submit as many questions as you would like. Our moderator will help direct your question to the appropriate official according to the topic area. There will be time at the end of the agenda for any questions you may have unrelated to the agenda topics. For those participating virtually, you can type your questions into the chat feature located at the bottom of the screen. The chat will be monitored and questions will be passed off to our moderator throughout the discussion. This evening is for our elected officials to hear from all of you. We will do our best to ensure your questions are directed to the appropriate people, even if they are not in the room. For our panelists, please watch Liz, lovely Liz here, our official timekeeper, for your cues. Yellow means to wrap up your thoughts and red means please stop so someone else has the opportunity to answer. To operate your mic, just push the button to talk. A great big thank you to all our volunteers from the Resource Exchange, the Independence Center, Cheyenne Village, CCHA, Skills Academy, and the ARC for your assistance tonight. And if I forgot anyone, I'm sorry. And finally, I would like to express my sincerest gratitude to Julie White, Tammy Ingram, Elizabeth Albo, Ginger Stringer, and Colleen Head Bachelor for your hard work and dedication to making today's events possible. Finally, yesterday was National Voter Registration Day. If you are not registered or would like to check your registration, visit govotecolorado.gov. That's very important. Again, thank you for participating, and it is my pleasure to introduce Wilford Romero, Executive Director of the Arc Pikes Peak Region.
Thank you, Christina, and again, welcome to tonight's town hall. Again, Wilford Romero, Executive Director of the Arc Pikes Peak Region. Hopefully I'm not sweating too much up here and I'm blinding you with my forehead, so I apologize, it's a little hot. But again, I have the privilege tonight of, get myself set here. I left my papers at home too, so I wasn't doing very good getting started here. But I have the privilege tonight of recognizing candidates for state office running in this upcoming election who are joining us tonight, both in person and virtually this evening. So please stand as I introduce you. Stephanie Vigil, House District 16. Stephanie. Regina English, House District 17. Rachel Stovall, House District 17. I believe it's Shana Black, House District 18. Is that right, Shana or Shana? Shana, okay, Shana. And joining us via Zoom is Catherine Green from Teller County, House District 60. Thank you again for joining us to learn more about the needs of people who are often overlooked and underserved in our community. The opportunity to experience this incredible venue is the result of the generosity of our sponsors, who we hope had the opportunity to visit at their table or during either the reception or the fair. And we want to thank, again, Christina had mentioned these agencies, but Aerial Clinical Services, Community Intersection, Elevated Arts Academy, Mountain Lane Home Health Care, Overture, Pikes Peak Respite Services, Q-Medic, and Springs Family Respite Care. Give those folks a hand. Thank you for your sponsorships. You know, the planning of this event starts immediately following the town hall. This event would not happen without the generosity, again, of our sponsors and the dedication of our planning committee members, agencies, and board of directors. This year, we added several new agencies to the committee. So if you would, please stand to be recognized as I call your agency name. Colorado Community Health Alliance. There you go in the back. Common Roots. There we are. Goodwill. No, I seen Tamara there. Okay. Silver Key. Skills Academy. And the Independence Center. The committee members who have continued to support the importance of this legislative town hall year after year are Cheyenne Village, staff, Dungarvin, the Resource Exchange, and the Arc Pikes Peak Region. It is evident that your time and dedication is the true nature of the collaboration we see tonight. Thank you for helping to make the Pikes Peak region accessible for all our community members. I now want to welcome Colleen Head Bachelor, CEO of the Resource Exchange.
Welcome, everyone. I'm really glad you're here tonight, and thank you all so much for our elected officials being here tonight. We greatly appreciate your time. You know, the Resource Exchange really takes our role seriously in contributing to really thoughtful public policy and legislative advocacy for people we serve. Those are people with a variety of disabilities and challenges that require long-term care and supports and support and access to our community. This year, we committed 5 staff and 3 board members to the planning of this event to demonstrate our commitment to this effort. I want to recognize our board chair, Dina Harchi, and board members Sarah Jack and Lois Landgraff for their participation in the planning of this event. Again, our staff that were already mentioned, Julie White, Liz Albo, Tammy Ingram, and Ginger Stringer. Thank you so much for the amount of effort and work you put into tonight. Thank you all as well for all of your participation in this event. It is what makes this a meaningful event and truly reflective of the real needs of the people that are supported in this community. It is what helps us move towards our goal of empowering people, strengthening families, and building inclusive communities. We're fortunate tonight to have two returning moderators with us for our town hall. And again, this is our 16th annual town hall. Ed Bowditch is a longstanding partner with the Resource Exchange. Ed has a master's degree in public policy from Harvard University and an undergraduate degree from Colorado College. In history and political science. His professional experience includes having spent 3 years on staff at Legislative Council, 7 years as senior staff to the Joint Budget Committee, and 1 year as Deputy Director of the Governor's Office of State Planning and Budgeting. He possesses an unparalleled familiarity with the state budget process, and we are so proud to maintain a professional paid relationship with Ed as our TRE lobbyist. He has done an amazing job representing the needs of the people that we support. We also have Lois Landgraff this year as co-moderator. Lois sits on the board of directors for the Resource Exchange and has been a public servant supporting this community for more than 12 years. Lois was born in San Diego and grew up mostly in California. She graduated summa cum laude from the University of Maryland with a Bachelor of Science degree and attended the University of Washington in Seattle for an MBA. Lois helped start the Cardiovascular Health Research Unit at at the University of Washington School of Medicine, and she moved to Colorado in 2002. Lois served on Fountain City Council for 4 years, then in the Colorado House of Representatives for 8 years, where she was ranking member of the Public Health and Human Services Committee and served on the Health, Insurance and Environment Committee. In addition to the Resource Exchange Board, Lois sits on the Salvation Army Board and is vice chair of the Parks Board. She's married and has 5 children and 6 grandchildren, and her son Todd is a client of the Resource Exchange. I'd like to welcome Ed and Lois to help us moderate tonight's event.
Thank you, Christina, Will, and Colleen. Again, my name is Ed Bowditch. It's a pleasure to be invited back here again this year. This is such an interesting and wonderful location for us to have this event. Welcome to the town hall. We have expanded this. Back in the day, it used to be TRE and the Arc, and now we're doing this to support people with disabilities and challenges, all people with disabilities and challenges who are in need of long-term support. This town hall gives citizens and constituents the opportunity to have direct interaction with the elected officials. I would also say, and I would encourage you, don't leave here and cross it off your list and wait until next year. Follow these folks on social media, go to their town halls, be persistent, but be polite when you have an issue to raise to them. They are all here voluntarily tonight. They could be at home watching. Lois just told me the Love Boat's coming back on or something. They could be at home doing other things, but it's great. It's a great testimony to their priorities that they are here to meet with all of us tonight. Tonight, I'll be very brief. I don't have them in the exact correct order, but in terms of the state legislators, Senators Gardner, raise your hand, Senator Heisey, 3 members of the House, Representative Carver, Snyder, and Bradfield. From the city of Colorado Springs, we have President of the Council, Tom Strand, Randy Helms, and then 2 elected officials from the city of Fountain, Mayor Sharon Thompson, and Deetra Duncan from the City Council. And a special thanks to Colin Laughlin, who is from the Department of Healthcare Policy and Finance Office of Community Living. It's great that he came down here as well. So tonight we will be talking about a series of issues. We've already had a very good question. The first question that came in, we will get to in a minute. We're going to start with housing and talk about housing. And I would throw this out. When you think about the challenges of housing, how do you get more accessible units, not just in, quote, the bad parts of town, not just in places where public transportation doesn't work. How do you get more accessible units that's kind of a state issue, but it's also a local issue. So I guess I'll just throw this one out and see who wants to answer it. How do you people are unable to afford housing because of resource limits or earning caps, or the housing may not be accessible for people with disabilities. How can we improve on that? So look at this, jump right in, Senator Heisey.
Thank you, Ed. Thanks, Bob. I appreciate the question. I did serve on the Affordable Housing Task Force last interim session, and we had some ARPA money to distribute, and we made recommendations. We didn't actually make the final decision, but we made recommendations. But I appreciate the way the question was framed. How do we get more? Because that really is the answer. And that pen's going to drive me crazy. We need more housing, not how do we make the housing affordable. Until we actually do have more, the prices aren't going to go down, because as was noted, something I was reading, if we build housing designed for this income level, but there's a slightly higher income level with no housing for them, they're going to take the less expensive housing because they can't take the next level up. So how do we do that? This group that we're speaking about here probably will never be able to pay market rates. We'll probably always be looking at some sort of a subsidy type program. And I think we've got to realize that we've got to bring the private sector in on this to make it work. Whether we're talking tax credits or what we're doing to make those successful developers that are selling, market rate housing, to make this palatable for them. I think we've got to look at how do we incentivize them to do it, because the government can't get in there and build houses and units that we need where we need them.
Anybody else? Yes.
Yeah, hi, I'm Tom Strand here with Randy Helms from your city council in Colorado Springs. And, we started with affordable. We've had multiple meetings throughout 2022 and 2021 on affordable and attainable housing. And we work with we're on the board of directors for utilities, as well as your city council in Colorado Springs. And I'm sure the same is true with the city council and the mayor of Fountain. Is that we work this every month and trying to find ways that we can get urban renewal money that comes in to kind of underwrite this. I'm on the regional building department so that we try and make sure that all the licensing that we do and the permitting is the lowest level in the state of Colorado. And it's a mission that we have to work monthly and weekly in order to try and find housing for everybody, but clearly those that need accessible housing that are in the ADA area, and we're very sensitive to that. Our mayor Southers has set 1,000 units of what he calls affordable attainable housing, and this year we've exceeded that. We work with the Housing and Building Association to do the best we can to try and increase that, but it is a priority for us, and it will continue that way into the future.
I'll do a follow-up on the housing topic. We got a great question here. Thank you to my assistant here. Yes, and by the way, we don't give her enough credit. She came up to the legislature for 8 years, conducted herself with dignity, and got all sorts of things done, and then went back to her community and is very involved and is a model, and as many people up here are. But really, we ought to be very proud of all the work you did up there. Yes. So on the housing topic, we need to provide a broader range of residential choices for the IDD community and for anybody with any sort of disabilities or challenges. Is there a move towards offering more choice, specifically for adults who would thrive living with a larger group of friends in a setting intentionally designed to provide opportunities for growth and community involvement? That's getting very specific for a local building department. But again, I would guess, I'm not a housing expert, that the private market probably wouldn't address this, but a city could, a local building department could. So do any of our local government representatives want to offer their thoughts on this? Colin will. Yes, Colin, good. Jump right in.
Sure. Sure. I am not by any means a local government person, but representing the Department of Healthcare Policy and Financing, the Office of Community Living, we actually administer and provide payment for all of the long-term care services in the state of Colorado under Medicaid. And so I noticed some very intentional wording in that question around intentional, the word itself, and what that looks like. And so I think sort of within that, we are examining ways to allow people who would like to live with other individuals with disabilities, irrespective of whatever that disability type may be, to be able to do so. I think the one thing that we are concerned about and what we've seen in some of these settings, and very limited experience here in Colorado, is that they can sort of be segregating and unto themselves. And so people don't have that full experience within the community. And so I'm very proud to say that we have supported a division of housing just this last year with the help of our state legislators down here to get over 800 new vouchers, many of those dedicated for individuals who would otherwise have to go into an intermediate care facility or a regional center if they're on any of the intellectual and developmental disability waivers, or oftentimes a nursing facility. And we can keep those people out by finding that affordable housing. Now, a voucher is not a one-size-fits-all solution. It is going to take public-private partnerships, but there are some very unique things that are happening even up in Douglas County on your way down, I believe in Castle Rock, where local governments, counties have gotten together, groups of people have gotten together and said, what are some ways that we can revitalize maybe older buildings, in particular organizations that may be approaching hotels, especially with the pandemic passing or hopefully passing. So there are a lot of things out there, but it will take, I think, a lot of solutions, both state, local, county, city, etc.
Anybody else like to talk on housing? Representative.
Thank you, Ed. Thank you all. I think one of the problems we have, is we look at a community like the disabled community and think of it as a monolith and one big community, and it's not. There's a lot of subcategories of people in different positions. So I've worked a lot with the Brain Injury Alliance, run several bills to try and help them out, and they're a unique community. And what we're seeing is that a lot of the congregate care facilities, whether it's VA homes and other places, Cheyenne Village now is also going through this. The large congregate care facilities were on their way in decline, but the pandemic really accelerated it. And so I'm seeing now more of a model of group homes, where you have maybe half a dozen individuals with a qualified caretaker there to help people navigate through the trials of the day. But I think if we break it up into a more manageable subcategories of folks and really specify down on what their needs are, that would be a better way to go than trying to think we're going to create, thousands of new properties. And then on a more macro level, there's a lot of things that we do right here in Colorado that are a hindrance to having a more affordable housing stock. So we have the senior homestead exemption, which is wonderful. Nobody wants to take that away, but seniors that want to downsize from a larger home where they raise their family, they're stuck with that 10-year rule and really cannot afford to leave that home that they're in. And I'd like to see us be able to work on that in some way. I had a bill last year that was the Middle Income Access Program. So we were talking about couples that make good salaries, a firefighter, a teacher, but they're getting further and further away from affording a home. So that program targets that segment. And I think we need to do the same thing in the overall housing community, is break it down into manageable sections of people and really drill down on what their needs are and how we can best satisfy those needs.
Okay, one more.
It is a really, really tough issue, and it can be very frustrating. I know we had a senior facility, and I've talked with Representative Bradfield, Senator Heisey, probably just about everybody. the CHAFA program for tax credits, it took 3 rounds, 3 years for us to get some senior affordable housing in Fountain. And the developer said, I can't wait another 3 years. I want to continue to build in Colorado, but I can't, because I can't wait another 3 years for every project that I have to do. You know, I want to build and I need to do it now before the costs rise. And I know there's a need here. So I think there's got to be a way for the counties and the cities and the state to work together on kind of addressing that issue somehow. But if you're interested in opening one, I really would encourage you to reach out to the elected officials in the county or the city before you purchase the property. Go to the neighborhoods and talk to the people and find out what's going on, where the transportation is. We get a lot of people that they purchase the property and then they get frustrated because, well, you should run a bus out here for me, and you should do this for me, and you should do that for me. And I encourage you to go to the planning departments before you purchase the property, talk to the economic development person, talk to the transportation coordinator, find out what's available. And so we can set you up for the best success within your community. I'm going to apologize if I talk too fast. My daughter used to be an interpreter and she used to yell at me all the time to slow down for the interpreter. And so really reach out to us before you purchase it, before you make your plans, so we can find out what's available for you. Maybe you could buy a property in enterprise zone or some other zone that does have funding that potentially come with it from the get-go. And so that you could be set up to really, really be successful from the beginning. And regional building is where you really need to go to. Regional building, you can usually find the plans and different things that happen in that property. Make sure everything that's been done there before you purchase it is permitted.
Thank you. Representative Bradfield.
Thank you. And thank you for asking me to be here. So often I think government is the problem, not the solver of problems. And so I really think that a great deal of government influence and meddling in can slow down the process, such as Mayor Thompson was talking about, taking 3 years in order to get all the permits and paperwork done so that this developer could begin a senior center. So I would think that the less we can have government involved, that means, you know, taking the developer, the city, the county, take on the responsibility of some of the state government work and be more interested in attracting good people to build places. And I do believe that Mayor Thompson's suggestion of get your ducks all in order before you buy your property is awfully sound. Thank you. I think that's a good idea.
Representative Carver.
And I also want to express my thanks for the invite to participate. Just a couple of items that I wanted to follow up on raised by my colleagues here on the panel. First of all, and I'm in my 8th year, one of the things that has been a little distressing to me over the years is, especially when I started in the legislature, was the disproportionate allocation of CHAFA funds and how they were allocated around the state. That has gotten better, somewhat better over time. But if you actually look at how those very, very important tax credits are allocated, we do have to make sure that when we're advocating for the Pikes Peak region, that in fact, we are getting a proportionate amount of funds specific to our growing population. And that has gotten better over time. It's an area that continues to needs to be monitored, and we need to continue to advocate and be active in that process. I also wanted to pick up on, and I think the point about the delay, anything that could be done with the CHAFA process that might streamline that. for willing developers, right? Those that are willing to build housing of this type. We need to lean forward with them in a process that works for their timeline whenever possible. And I do want to follow up on Representative Snyder's point on the senior homestead exemption. You know, for several years, a number of us up here have tried to pass a law that would make the senior homestead exemption portable so that you wouldn't be faced with this 10-year rule. You got a house that's full of stairs, way more than what you need, and you want to downsize, but then you look at losing your property tax exemption, which is significant in reducing your property tax when you have limited income. So unfortunately, that bill was voted down numerous times. I'm sorry to say on a party line vote most time, which I don't understand. So more work to be done. We need to make sure that is portable, especially for medical reasons, right? Very important. Thank you.
One final question on housing that we received from the audience. I know some of our panelists have said that too much government intervention maybe slows up the development of housing, but this question, can it be required that a certain amount be set aside for low-income housing development or specific units that are accessible? Can you, at the local government level, make those requirements, or would you consider it? And again, that's a question from the audience. To our local government representative, or even Senator Gardner.
Thank you, Ed. And thank you all. This is my 15th of the 16. I missed one by being on the other side of the world, I think in 2012. And it will be my 15th session in the legislature. Can local government do that? Can it require certain types of housing to be built in conjunction with other kinds of housing? Yes. Should they? That's a political question, and my answer is no. First of all, let's start with this about affordable housing this year in particular. I mean, we've talked about this at every session I've been to. Affordable housing in this time and in this day is not unique to the IDD community. It is far more acute, but it is not a unique problem. And as Senator Heise alluded to at the beginning of this discussion, we need to increase the supply of housing. We need to incentivize those who build housing to do so with the types of housing in the places that we need it to be. So I don't have any more answers to this problem than I did 15, 16 years ago. I would encourage you to think about proposals for us that incentivize builders, whether it be through credits, whether it be through fast tracking the development plans, or just getting the support on our planning commissions and our local governing bodies to ensure that the types of housing for group homes, for housing for those with special needs are built, that the folks who invest money, and they have lots of places to invest it, and let's face it, they want a return on their investment. There's nothing wrong with that. That's what makes America great and run. And when we create incentives for those builders, they will come to the table to do that. If you tell them what they must do, it will become more expensive for them, and they will go the next city over or the next state over. So I just encourage you, think creatively about how we can incentivize these kinds of this kind of housing, these kinds of housing solutions for those that need it at the affordable level. Because again, I'll say it one more time, it is not a unique problem to this community. It is something that all Americans are suffering now but it is particularly more acute for you, and we need to build a supply of housing for you.
Thank you, Senator Gerger. And we'll move now to transportation. One more comment. Council member.
You're good.
Thank you, Ed. Lois. Yeah, it's really critical, as has been said this evening, and I too am very honored to be here this evening. For housing, it's so critical to understand that we need housing of all types. It's been mentioned a couple of times, and I just wanted to reinforce that. The supply and demand for housing is across the board. Marketplace housing, workforce housing, multifamily housing, as well as the housing that we're talking about this evening that we really need. It's so critical to understand that. And if we direct or pass legislation that directs builders to build a specific number or type of housing, they will leave and they'll go elsewhere. It is critical to have incentives to create the types of housing we're talking about tonight. But it's so critical to know we need market force housing. Everyone in our community needs housing at all levels. And that's what drives our country. Supply and demand will drive down the cost of our housing. And builders will be able to build, I believe, more affordable, accessible type housing. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. So we have a number of local government questions here on transportation. Specifically to the city, are there plans to expand ADA public transit service areas? If yes, when will it take place and where will it expand to?
Is that directed to Colorado Springs?
I think that's directed to Colorado Springs.
And after you, I can.
I'll jump in, Ed, on
Sure.
that. And that's something, our city hall is right across the street from our main transit center. And that's something, twice a month on the second and fourth Tuesdays, we have public awareness where the people can come and talk to all their 9 city council members. And they often come and talk about transit issues that they need. We work directly with the Mountain Metro Transit System. One of our members of City Council, you may know, Yolanda Avila, is legally blind, and she uses public transportation constantly. And, Puma is her guide dog that she's got. And so we rarely have a meeting that we don't have constituents come to us to talk about how we're going to expand it. I think the question is when and how. We talk about that constantly with our transit people. I can't give you, a date like the 1st of December that's going to happen. But I'll tell you, your council members are very sensitive to public transportation, especially public transportation for people that are in wheelchairs, that are on walkers, that may be legally blind, that may have deaf problems. And it's something that we consider. And I would encourage you to come to our meetings and talk about these issues. Randy and I hear issues about motorboating on Prospect Lake or about our community centers. We hear about issues that concern, maybe we ought to pass this mushroom legislation that's, going to be on the November ballot, or the marijuana legislation. But what we need to hear is from you and how important transit is to you and your relatives and friends so that it'll become even more of a priority for us.
And I've got a follow-up for a specific issue. What are you actively doing to prevent illegal parking in the hash marks of handicap loading and unloading zones? I should never be held hostage by another illegally parked vehicle, ever. So
yeah, and I'll jump in. And Randy and I we were just briefed yesterday from a member of our city government about this particular issue that happened in our university,
Trader Joe's.
It happened at Trader Joe's, where an individual parked their car in the handicap parking area. And apparently when our Colorado Springs Police Department was notified, they were unsure of how to deal with that. I can assure you they're going to be sure how to deal with it in the future in terms of ticketing and maybe even towing. And that is an issue that we're not going to allow to happen. I think there's a $450 ticket that you get when you park in that area. And it's something that I know Randy and I will share with our other council members to ensure that this sensitivity to people who are not authorized to park in handicap parking do not do so. So I hope that person feels more comfortable knowing that their communication with us has gotten very high level of attention.
I really like that direct answer. Yes. Oh, go ahead, Mayor.
Yes, this is just something I'd like to throw out in general, because this has been an issue in my family a couple of different times, is temporary handicap parking, temporary need for handicap parking or ability to ride the different transit systems. You know, we've had situations last year, for example, my husband had 2 brain surgeries, and I managed as the only driver in the family to fall and break my arm during that time. And I was having cataracts grow. So we literally had a 1-arm, 1-eye driver toting my husband around town to therapies because I could not get a temporary pass for weeks for the ADA pass for the buses. So I really, really would like to challenge every community out there, if you require ADA passes, to please work quickly to get people those passes, because most of us, if you have surgery or something, you only need them for 6 to 8 weeks. We can't wait 6 to 8 weeks for the appointment to get the bus pass. So there's got to be a way to help the communities, because I know as we're an aging population, I'm not going to be a rarity anymore.
Yes, Council Member Duncan.
All right, thank you for having me tonight. I just want to talk about a little bit about disabled veterans. And a lot of people are confused with that. If you have a disabled veteran tag, that means that you can park in a handicap space. And that is not so. You have to have the tag that's on your car, or the wheelchair that's on your license plate. A lot of people, I've been around a lot of people going back and forth about whether or not the disabled veteran, that happened yesterday, the great thing that this came up, but I just want to say that make sure that you know the difference between disabled veteran and a handicap space, because those two do not intertwine with each other. You have to have the sticker that on your license plate, or you have to have the hanger to be able to park in a handicap place.
Representative Snyder.
Thanks, Ed. And to the original question, I think it's just going to take political will on the part of our local officials. I served 12 years in local government. Back in 2009 and 8, I chaired a committee for it, the future of regional transit, 18 months with a huge stakeholder group. We came up with a way forward, way to get more transportation options to people who need them. Colorado Springs went to a new form of government, a new mayor, Mayor Bach, and that got shelved, and it never went any further. So we have a 10% allocation in the RTA permanently for transportation, but that is just keeping us where we are. Okay. And I think it's a matter of political will. When El Paso County moved the Citizen Service Center up to that old Intel building, that was wonderful for the county's needs, but it didn't serve the needs of the people who need those services. For many of them, it made it 2 or 3 transfers and a 3-hour trip to get there. So I think we just need to have the political will and prioritize the transportation needs of our disabled community.
Yeah. Councilmember Helms.
Right. I'd like to add on exactly to that last question too. As an example, I'm the vice chair of the PPRTA, the Pikes Peak Regional Transportation Authority. And it was clear to us about a year ago that in the metro transit, routes were being closed down. We were reducing the number of the routes. What we dug into it to find the issue, and of all things, it was bus drivers. And so how do you solve that? Well, we worked together with the Metro District to come up with 2 things. One, raise the minimum rate or the minimum salary for bus drivers. Number 2, pay them a bonus to join. So that has worked over the last year, not well enough, but it has been a positive increase. So we've been able to add some of the routes back with Metro Transit. So that is one example of us trying to address those particular issues. Thank you.
Okay. One quick more comment, Madam Mayor.
my citizens would be thrilled with a 3-hour bus drive. It was 6.5 hours from Fountain because we actually put a city employee on it to ride our bus up to the transfer station of Pikes Peak Community College and then ride it up there, spend an hour at Garden of the Gods and ride back. And he said, oh my gosh, I'll quit if you ever make me do that again. But so what Fountain did is pre-COVID, when we had to stop during COVID, is we actually did a direct bus route from our senior center in Fountain up to Garden of the Gods 1 day a week for people that had appointments up there, needed to get up there and do it. I think the frustrating part was we paid somebody to come in every day and most days no one used it. And we advertised it everywhere. And so if you see services offered, please try to use them because we can't keep them going if they're not being used. And so even after COVID, we have not brought that back because it was something that wasn't used. But yeah, we do understand the transportation issues are really, really hard.
A different type of twist on transportation issues involves scooters. How many of you have either almost been run over by somebody on a scooter or have had to deal with a scooter in the sidewalk? I was walking outside the Capitol and somebody came down 40 miles an hour, it seemed like. I had a very polite thing. I yelled at him and he waved at me. Didn't have all 5 fingers, but just waved at me with 1 finger. But with all the scooters downtown, what is the city doing to keep them from being dropped in the middle of the sidewalk, barring access for people with mobility concerns?
Know that we're doing.
You're picking on the city here, Ed, but the city is not doing enough. The city's not doing enough. We currently have 740 sworn police officers for 200 square miles and for 500,000 people. And they've got to make decisions as to what the more serious safety and well-being of our community is. And unfortunately, we're not doing enough with the scooter issues. They're thrown everywhere. When we get into tourist season, which we're just coming out of now in September, they seem to be everywhere. We're going to focus more on that, Ed, I think, going forward with increasing the number of our sworn police officers and ensuring that this is an area that's a priority.
Okay.
Yeah. If I could add just real quick to that. So one of the things that we are doing is really pushing hard on the contractors who are doing that for us to pick those scooters up ASAP. And we have really come down on them to do that.
Yeah. Okay. Good. Let me move to Colin. We haven't picked on you yet. Oh no. I mean, we haven't gotten your perspective.
I have thoughts on scooters if you want to hear them.
Two questions that I think are probably appropriate for you. What can we do to improve the metro mobility and the brokerage system that oversees state Medicaid paid transportation for challenged clients? So many people are frustrated with long waits or no-shows.
Yeah, that's a great question. And so within Medicaid, we have sort of 2 branches of transportation. We have non-medical transportation that serves our home and community-based service waivers, which I'll talk about here at the end, and then non-emergent medical transportation. And the latter has the brokerage that I know has given people in this area in particular a lot of issues over the last several years. In fact, I think back in 2016 and 17, I sat on a committee that was sort of working on some of the issues associated with that. It's gotten better. Is it perfect or nearing perfect? Absolutely not. And I think it goes to what some of my co-panelists talked about around workforce. I mean, fundamentally, we don't have enough people to provide the rides that need to be provided. We also don't have the flexibility in service. And so I don't know how most people in this room live their life, and being so thoughtful to 2 weeks from now say, I need to run to Safeway or I need to go to this infamous Trader Joe's. That's not how people should have to plan their day. That's not how people interact with the community. And so when you put confines on transportation, you put confines on how people are able to live independently. And that is very, very unfortunate. So I think what we're going towards is a more aligned model. One of the things I was very happy to work on this year with Representative Colin Larson from the South Denver Metro is actually being able to start paying rides under the TNCs or transit network carriers, getting more flexible so people can get that Uber or Lyft or whatever it is. I know there's a bunch of different spinoffs there. That's not a silver bullet. We need to make sure that people still have that transportation, and it needs to get more varied in who it serves. And so from a Medicaid perspective, we have some limited funding there. but we're, I think, moving towards a more aligned model that moves away from what I will call overscheduling of individuals and putting people into boxes.
Thank you for addressing that, because there was another question about a Lyft type app for van fleet options. And so we appreciate that. Boy, a lot of transportation questions. One of the online questions, I'll go back to our friends at the state level. The state right now is in a TABOR refund situation. I think the state is returning to the taxpayers over $3 billion this year. Great time to be a taxpayer when you get all this money back. But you could, and the state last year authorized a few tax credits, because at this point, if you authorize a tax credit, you're not taking money away from services for individuals with disabilities or education. You're just lowering that potential tax refund that people are getting. Can private van fleets receive a tax write-off or a tax credit for installing wheelchair accessible vans? So that would be a state tax credit that someone could get if they had a van fleet for installing a wheelchair accessible vans. To our 5 state legislators, what do you think? Probably wouldn't be a huge amount of people who would use it, but it might be an incentive for somebody to do that. Senator Gardner.
Well, as I said, with respect to housing, bring us ideas. I mean, I think this is an idea that we ought to explore. It is the kind of solution to the problem that, frankly, we like to see, because it doesn't make anyone do anything. It simply says, here's an advantage. Here's what might work if you do this thing that we find very desirable. And tax credits always work better than an additional tax to get the behaviors that you want. And I, as a conservative, I'm a little squeamish about that, but the reality is that tax policy works to not only raise revenues, but to encourage some set of things and discourage another set of things. And if you deal with tax policy, you will deal with those. So I like the idea. I'm sure there's, all that staff that used to be part of it. I'm sure they'll have a lot of reasons why we can, shouldn't, might be able to, and so forth. But that's how ideas begin, and that's how legislation begins.
Okay. All right. Oh, Representative Snyder.
Thank you. Yeah, I think in all of these areas, whether it's housing or transportation, we have to recognize the government's never going to be the sole answer to these problems. Never going to, I don't know how many billions we have in TABOR refund. We're never going to have enough money to solve all these issues. But what we can do is strategically invest money to incentivize, in the case of transportation and in housing, private enterprise to get aligned with the goals that we want. Mm-hmm. Inclusionary zoning, which we were talking about a little while ago, is never going to fly in Colorado, in my opinion. Mm-hmm. I've seen it tried in other places. It's never really worked out. Yeah. And many times some of these things end up having unintended negative consequences. But if we can strategically invest government money in where it's needed to bridge the gap, to get projects built, to get transportation aligned with the needs of people, that's the way we should be thinking about our government and our surpluses.
Let me ask the audience, if I'm sure somebody must know, what is the approximate cost to retrofit a van to make it accessible for somebody with a wheelchair? $25,000. Okay. So you're talking about, could you have a state tax incentive that would cover part of that, or you would get to reduce your taxes by some amount, 15,000, whatever it may be, to try and provide an incentive. So it would be along those lines. Yes. Plus the cost of the van. Yeah, I mean, you have the cost of the van. So there's a few layers to this, but again, it would be using the government as an incentive through tax policy to try and incent this. Representative Carver.
Thank you, Ed. And, this is an issue that not just the having transportation options that include wheelchairs, although that's critically important for so many of the folks in our community. but how to expand choices broadly, whether if it's a tax credit for an individual family to have that, but also, and it's the service providers in this community. I know the very first year I served, we dealt with getting the private companies, the nonprofits that provided transportation, timely reimbursement. If you don't do that, these companies are going to go out of business. It is providing the right level of reimbursement for specialized transportation so that they can buy vans that have wheelchair capacity in sufficient number. So we dealt with that situation. We dealt with a very unfortunate state government system in how they set up an overall brokerage arrangement, which quite frankly, can I just say was a disaster. Mm-hmm. I got so many phone calls, not just from individuals, but from a range of providers in this region who said it is arbitrary. It is not, if this keeps going, we're going to have to shut down. The exact opposite of what we're trying to do, which is to expand options, right? So it is all these administrative processes that can either support and grow service providers and choices for families and individuals, or if done badly, reduce choice and options. And so that's why not just how we support the growth of service providers, but how we set the reimbursement rates, and then for heaven's sake, pay them on time. At one point, we had some service providers that their paperwork had been sitting there for months and months and months unpaid. And their margins and their ability to survive. So, you know, that's what your state reps are for, is to raise this and move the bureaucracy. So we have to think systemically in how we build up choice and supply to serve you.
I will close out the transportation section just by reading these final two questions to make sure they go on the record, so to speak. How do we change the requirement for non-emergency medical transportation, Medicaid transportation, to not require 3-day advance scheduling? Again, Colin, you mentioned that people's lives don't necessarily work in this regimented multi-day scheduling. Some people need a doctor's ride as soon as possible and don't have time to wait for 3 days. So I think you kind of addressed that. This one's kind of interesting. I think that submitting a transportation plan to TRE and 211 and to the El Paso County Helping Hands would make for a better plan. So as the city and the county come up with transportation plans, make sure you include the voices of all of the wonderful advocacy organizations within the county so you can get their direct feedback. I think that's a wonderful suggestion. This one, doing a backtrack back to housing, my boss Lois over here said, this is an interesting idea, so I better do it. Going back to housing just for a minute, cooperative housing services where differently abled and aged individuals can pool their limited resources to live better and more independently is far less expensive. And collectively, they can hire help, a driver, a cook. And that's not isolating people, that's using different types of people in the same community. And that was a very interesting suggestion that was put forth here. I think we do want to move on to kind of services and supports. For many years, when she was in the legislature, Representative Landgraff was part of the sponsorship of a bipartisan plan to require the Department of Healthcare Policy and Financing to come up with a multi-year plan to end the wait list. And the bill passed, I think, in 2012. And in fairness, it took a few years to kind of get things going. But the advocacy organizations, in part, where's Emma from Alliance. I know she was here.
She had to take off.
She had to take off. So Emma, the Alliance, which represents all the community center boards and a number of providers, they really picked up the mantle and really made sure that the department stuck to this, and the department was great about it. But it did have to go through the governor's office and all that. The state has been very successful at eliminating a number of the waiting lists in the IDD area. The most expensive IDD waiting list is still in force. So if you are waiting for the most comprehensive services, you are on a waiting list. So is there a plan to increase funding for the DD waiver to eliminate that waiting list?
I can start.
Sure.
I guess
yes.
Certainly that last ellipses, I would maybe turn to the fellow panelists. So the history behind this in 2013, 2014 with the end the wait and the wait list with the plan, we submitted that plan, and we actually every year, typically in January or February, whenever it's scheduled, we go in front of the legislature and we provide an update about how many people are on the wait list, what people's statuses are, how long the average wait time is, all of those things. We have actually ended two wait lists. We've ended the Children's Extensive Services wait list and the Supported Living Services wait list, but we know that most comprehensive waiver really is where a lot of people need and want to be. And so we continue to work and bring that down. We had legislation passed a couple of years ago that allowed for aging caregiver consideration, for homeless and kind of disruption of service consideration. So we've actually gotten a lot better. We're now getting upwards, typically 400 to 600 new people on that wait list just from the churn, if you will, as well as investments made by the legislature this last year, getting over 600 people on the DD waiver. And so those are things that we're doing internally. I think what the biggest component is, and I know we're going to be talking about workforce here shortly, is just the ability for capacity right now. We actually do know TRE and other community center boards are putting out those opportunities to families, to members who maybe have been waiting years to get on the DD waiver, and they can't find a service provider for a variety of reasons. So we're trying to figure that out. We've invested a significant amount of money there. The one other thing I'd just mention to do the diligence there, and my 30-second reminder, is when that report was due, what we heard loud and clear from people was, this is how we would like this set of services to continue, this comprehensive set of services to continue. So when we came back, we said this is going to cost approximately $225 million to do that. That number has gone up. And while the average length of stay has gone down, there are about the same amount of people waiting. And so they're waiting less time. We've gotten a lot better at figuring out how to get people on urgently, but it is something we're working towards. So we've got to increase capacity and ensure that we have enough providers across the board, whether they be residential or community-based, that can serve individuals on all of our waivers.
So suffice it to say, for our state legislators, please continue to keep that as a priority, continuing to buy down the waiting list. On a different issue, does anybody have any updates? And I think Representative Bradfield, you've been involved with this one, on how the newly established Behavioral Health Administration will support persons with IDD and older adults. So we'd love to hear an update on that.
Well, thank you. I wish I could give you an update, but I don't have one. Sorry.
All right. I know that there's been a lot of focus by the legislature on designing a new behavioral health system, and it may be that it's too soon to answer that question. So I'm sorry to put you on the spot, but I know you've been involved with those in the planning stages and whatnot, but it just may be too soon. But it's something that we'll want to watch to make sure that people with IDD and any other disabilities are effectively served. So, oh, yes.
Thank you. The Behavioral Health Task Force was a monumental job because there is so much that needs to be done for behavioral health, and we are as a state so far behind and not doing well in that field at all. And the problems that need to be solved all begin and end with the number of people who can provide services. And that across the state is very lacking. And we must recruit, we must do other things that we can to provide services for people, but we have to have people who are qualified to give those services. Telehealth has been a remarkable tool to use, but that's not the answer to all the problems. A tremendous amount of one-time money has gone into this. I believe in the next 12 to 18 months, we will see the behavioral health, the mental health services have changed significantly, especially when it comes around to the financial reporting and payment areas. Those were a big stickler, and just services for kids, for substance abuse, for families. It'll be big, it will be good, but it will take time. So that's all I can tell you. Thank you.
Thank you. Anybody else? Yep, Representative Snyder.
Yeah, I don't want to get too far afield, but there was a bill in 21 that I was a part of that created an alternative response study program, and drawing a parallel from criminal justice, we see that people in the disabled community, like many other communities, were disproportionately having bad outcomes from their interactions with law enforcement. And I think one of the reasons was it really wasn't a law enforcement need. It was a behavioral health need. So we've already got a pilot program. We're working with Colorado counties to get, that done in I think it's 12 or 15 counties doing a pilot program. And you're seeing cities like Denver already are starting to have ride-alongs where they have a behavioral health specialist riding along and intervening and stopping that before it becomes a bad outcome and bad law enforcement. So I think there's parallels there as far as how we can get our behavioral health standing up force that Representative Bradfield just mentioned, but getting them out into the community being most effective. And I think we can draw parallels from what we've done in criminal justice and law enforcement responses. And I think that's probably a path that will be at the forefront of what goes on with our behavioral health in the future.
Thank you. Colin?
Sure, I'll be really quick. So there's actually, in addition to that pilot, which has had actually a big impact on the disability community, there's another pilot that's focused specifically on individuals with intellectual or developmental disabilities. And the intent of that pilot is actually to get people who are cross-trained. So they have the behavioral health training with the training of working with individuals with neuro differences or those specified skills with working with individuals with an IDD. And our goal is to get in various areas of the state, get those individuals trained up and begin to show that within that pilot, if you have that training and if you have that response in which you can provide that more immediate support and people don't get lost in the behavioral health system, which I'm sorry, the current system does have holes for individuals with behavioral health issues that have an IDD, that have a brain injury, that have those neuro differences, and so are neuroatypical. And so we are working to solve that. And I can tell you, having been invited to conversations that I have not been invited in for several years now because of the Behavioral Health Task Force, people are paying more attention. So there is more conversation there. There's a recognition that when these systems are failing individuals with disabilities, it's making things much worse across the system. Impacts are downstream. And so I think there is a lot to be said about where we're at now. And I think where we'll be in 18 months. And I'm hopeful that all those things together will have a lot to show for it.
Okay, thank you. Oh, Madam Mayor.
Yeah, in the city of Fountain, we have two co-responder teams. We call them beacon teams. that we're really excited about. So we now have 7-day-a-week coverage for our Beacon team. And what the Beacon teams are is it's a specially trained law enforcement officer that has gone through behavioral health training with a licensed social worker. And so they are out on the streets. They wait till a regular team clears the situation, whatever it is. And then they come in and if possible, if the person wants them to come in, they do have a choice. They come in and then they can clear the regular officer to go back out on the patrol. And then this team stays there. And whether it's helping family members and they can also direct admit. So if someone is having a crisis, they don't have to use the emergency room or the jail as a place to go. The licensed social worker can directly admit them. Now, finding a place is another issue. Everybody's, yeah. So, and then they also do follow up with the family to make sure they have a plan in place for if that crisis happens again. And they're willing to work with family members to have a plan in place before a crisis even occurs. So you can call our police department and ask for a Beacon unit to come help you put a plan in place for your family. Because we do, everybody knows, you have some friends and family members that have that need. Another really neat thing we do is when it was designed by one of our officers is called a home safe program. You can sign up ahead of time and there's no age limit on it. You can sign up. My son is on it, and you give them all the information about the person. And if you call 911 saying this person is missing or this person is having a crisis, all that information will pop up in the officer's screen. You can include a photo of them. You can say, are they attracted to water or not? Are they scared of bright lights? How should we handle the situation? Will they flee? Will they freeze? What will happen? You give them all the tips so that when they respond, they know the best thing to do. So they're not going up and down the streets with the sirens going on if that person is afraid of that, and that's going to make them hide more. So please be proactive if you live in Fountain, and our officers are more than willing to share that. So if your community doesn't have that, we can sure get that form to you. And then we have low sensory nights to try to help people. Any age, again, can come to the fire station. They have a once a year low sensory night where they have all the equipment out. They can climb on it. They can see what it is. So they're not afraid of it. They can put the mask on so they can see when the fireman comes to their house, what it'll sound like, what it'll look like. And so we ask you to do a lot of those things to really, really be proactive. And I want to make one comment back to specialized transit. I'm on the Pikes Peak Area Council of Governments. I'm the first vice chair. We are in the process of doing our 10-year specialized transit plan. Those plans will go up for public comment before they become, Gail's nodding her head because she's on that committee. Those plans will go out for public comment. And we usually don't get very much public comment back from the plans that we put out there. So please, if you see those being advertised on social media or in the newspaper, that certain plans are coming out from different councils of government or offices, make your comments. That's the time to make them. Thank you.
We are having very robust questions and sometimes robust answers as well, very thorough answers, which is great. That's why we're here. But I do need to kind of move us along just because we're running out of time. I'm going to just read this next statement for our two council members from the city of Colorado Springs. You don't need to answer this one. Why does Colorado Springs have parking meters in the disabled parking spaces? So just something to think about.
I couldn't know that.
Could you? Yeah. Could you?
I think that's a great question. I've got a meeting with our parking director tomorrow, and I'll get back with an answer to you, Ed, so that we can share that with the community.
Okay.
I don't have a good answer to that.
Yeah.
And
okay. Good. Moving on to education quickly. Inclusion begins with our children. Are there any plans to increase special education funding or to increase training for educators to support inclusion practices? That was an online question. Now, I do know that last year there was a bipartisan bill that increased the state allocation for special education by $80 million. And I know that passed, had strong support. It was, again, bipartisan, as it should be for something like that. I believe also there was a bill a few years ago, I think by then Representative Buenteo, that required teachers who were going for licensure hours to take a certain number of hours in special education. So I don't know if that's probably only been in effect for a year or two, but that's moving in that direction, trying to get more people trained in special education. I guess if any of our panelists want to answer any of those things, but I think those are kind of both address this. And I'm happy to go on. There's one about post-secondary education. What will you do to ensure students with disabilities have equal opportunities to attend college and receive the supports they need? Representative Bradfield.
Thank you, Ed. There was a bill and it passed, and it was about post-education and people with IDD. And it was a continuation of a bill that had been run several years before with a pilot program of a Arapahoe Community College.
And UNC, I think.
UNC and UCCS. Yes.
Right.
And of which they enrolled students with special needs. And those students had somebody not go with them all day long, but would act as a special assistant and help them with their coursework and everything. I tell you, the program has been so incredibly successful that we renewed the program and also will allow other colleges and universities to apply to be a part of it. I can give you the name of people at UCCS who were so enthusiastic about the program and how well it worked for their students. And we have had one or two already graduate. And so that is with, a bachelor's degree. So yay, yay, yay. All right.
Mm-hmm. Agree. We need to celebrate our victories in these things. So, and perhaps that program could even be expanded to provide more options in the future. Yes, Representative.
Thank you. There was another bill, education bill, that also passed, and that was also post-secondary. And that was if you are coming to college and you have a disability, and this is more in the realm of physical disability. Maybe you are a veteran and you have artificial limbs, that type of thing. If you will self-identify to the college that you will have a disability, that there is a program available to give you whatever assistance you need. If stairs are a problem, then something else will be done. It's really new, and our Colorado colleges and universities embraced it. I hope that people will utilize this. As I said, you have to self-identify, and otherwise, you are just a normal college student who's expected to be in class on time and do what the professor expects. So thank you.
Thank you. I think I'm probably going to start getting the red card flashed at me. So I think at this point, I would like to invite our panelists who can remain after for a few minutes. But most importantly, let's have a round of applause for everyone on the panel tonight. I'd also like to thank our online guests, everyone in the audience, and especially our wonderful interpreters. So thank you so much for all your help tonight. With that, I think I'm going to close the 16th annual town hall meeting. It has been a great event. Again, hopefully some of our elected officials can stay for your polite questions if you'd like to engage them. But as I said at the beginning, and as was said even before I got up here, register to vote and make sure you politely engage your elected officials. We still have more and more questions coming in from Lois that just shows how many issues there are for people with disabilities. But thank you all for coming tonight, and thanks to all the organizing organizations. Thank you, Lois.